So yeah, I'd like to think myself as a QGIS developer, but I'm actually just a GIS developer. So I'm here today to kind of just have a chat about QGIS as a potential alternative to proprietary software. But kind of before we kind of kick off there, I just want to give a bit of background about myself really. Um, so what do I do? I've got a very broad spectrum of jobs, but as you can see there, I'm kind of like a GIS developer, a bit of GIS consultant, database administrator, do a bit of emergency planning. But on the whole, most people, my organisation at Windsor and Maidenhead Borough Council, know me as the chap that just does maps. I'm quite happy with that title, to be honest. And so where do I kind of sit within the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, RBWM? Well, I sit in IT of about 40 staff. There's 4 of us in the developer team, and I am one of 2 developers. And we kind of have a very broad range of QGIS users at the council, totaling somewhere nearer probably the 130 mark now. But we cover all aspects of looking after GIS in terms of looking after QGIS, people's data, helping them create projects, and such things like highways, licensing, planning policy, customer services as well. And what I hope to come on to today is kind of like how we got to kind of the QGIS approach. So what is QGIS and why open source? Excuse me. So QGIS is an open source application. Now there are very many kind of open source types of licensing, but the QGIS license, open source license, effectively means that you can do whatever you like to the code. You can just keep it for yourself. You can go in and manipulate the code and redistribute it. You can do whatever you like with QGIS. And that's one of kind of the little pluses of this type of open source. It runs on Windows, Macs, if you're into your Linux, all those sort of flavors. Although if you've got a Raspberry Pi, don't even attempt it on a Raspberry Pi. And there is even now 2 flavors of QGIS that actually run on Android devices. Mac support isn't all there at the moment. There are a few QGIS developers out there that kind of specifically play with Macs, but I think the kind of whole Apple ethos and kind of buying into iPads and all that sort of stuff has kind of prevented any sort of development in that sort of direction. QGIS itself has been knocking around since around 2002, when it was first kind of put out as an open source project, and up to 2015, and we've now got version 2.12, and I think version 2.14 is coming out very soon. And the release cycle for this sort of stuff is every sort of 3 to 4 months. The QGIS project as itself has a really good community feel about it, which makes it a real pleasure to kind of be part of. You can be a hardcore coder that kind of goes into the back end of QGIS and really tinkers around with making the application do whizzy-poppy things, or you can be right at the other end of the spectrum and actually just kind of help out, because you know you can't code, in writing documentation, supporting the website, etc. And that kind of global community development feel is kind of really nice in the QGIS community. I think I just jumped a slide, sorry. So what at RBWM did QGIS replace? So prior to 2013, we were at RBWM an entirely Esri establishment. We had this database engine technology behind called ArcSDE. using ArcGIS Server, which allows you to deliver kind of web type applications. We used every single flavor of ArcMap, which I think now is called ArcGIS for desktop. And we had a plethora of Esri extensions. And out of all this kind of bag of goodness, it was costing us a heap load of money, but we just kind of couldn't kind of build on it and sort of deliver the QGIS as we wanted because of license restrictions and the cost, etc. So why did we go to QGIS at RBWM? Effectively, QGIS ticked all the boxes that we ever needed at the Windsor and Maidenhead for a GIS to do, in as much as we needed something that could view data, search and query and do some analysis work on data, the ability to edit that data, and the ability to print a map. Now, the reason as well we kind of went in the QGIS direction was because of this kind of austerity measures that were coming in. So, as I kind of suggested about our Esri estate, it was costing us a bucket full of money. We only had about 17 licenses for a desktop GIS, so ArcMap, and we had a few people using the actual ArcGIS server technology. I'd started to develop some web applications using that technology, and we had redundancies and natural wastage occurring in staff at the time, and basically new staff came in and they'd say, well, can we have access to GIS? And we basically said, well, yeah, we can. We're quite happy to give you GIS, but we need some money to buy you a license. And effectively the answer was, well, we don't have any money for a license. So it became very apparent around 2012, 2013 that people wanted GIS, but very frustratingly, we couldn't give them GIS because of this whole kind of lack of money in the pot. So QGIS kind of fitted the bill of being able to provide GIS to lots of people. So why does the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead like QGIS? As an organisation, and kind of this is pretty much talking from a IT council point of view, it is really easy to deploy and has a really small IT footprint. You compare that to the likes of ArcMap, and I can't actually say what the kind of the footprint is for MapInfo, but I should imagine it's very comparable to the Esri stuff. QGIS can actually be installed, for want of a better expression, and run from a USB stick. There's a very good developer out there, GI developer, called Jo Cook, and she has produced this GIS on a USB stick, and QGIS is part of that. And so literally, yeah, you can just kind of just plug it into a Windows machine, tap on the exe, and QGIS will literally just open. It's pretty much like a plug and play. We don't use that sort of plug and play initiative at the Windsor and Maidenhead, but our infrastructure, which is kind of all virtualized now and in the cloud, effectively means that we do one single install of QGIS onto a server, and then we can stream that application to as many desktops as we like. And as I said, we've got about 130 odd people now using QGIS in that manner. Now, unlike the Esri extensions, which were costing perhaps £2,000 per annum to purchase and renew, on the QGIS side, plugins are extremely brilliant. So, for instance, we've shared the cost of developing at least 2 QGIS plugins. There's one called the Aston Technology Gazetteer, which allows us to do address lookups against our own data. We've helped also a company called Lutra, who are a GIS consultancy, to produce an auto trace plugin, very comparable to the sort of thing you find in the Esri suite. And for that, we've only had to splash out, you know, a couple of 300 quid to help develop that plugin, because a lot of other councils and authorities have come in and just basically shared that single cost. And so we've now got those plugins out there. As an open source piece of kit, again, it is just cheaper than proprietary. We did some kind of initial thinking of how much QGIS has actually saved and how much it might cost to kind of implement this sort of thing again. We said that actually over the last 3 years, in terms of over the last 4 years, sorry, in terms of saving money, we have probably saved over £75,000 in proprietary GIS costs. If we were to go to someone like Esri, perhaps even MapInfo, and say, this is the kind of infrastructure we now want to deliver. We want to be able to do cloudy this, virtualized applications that, and we want it to go to at least 130 people within the organization, it would probably cost us over £100,000 just in year one to implement. So we have made huge savings in using open source GIS, not just QGIS. And then there's the kind of the commercial support for it. RBWM was a very early adopter of QGIS, and when we started our road into QGIS, there were probably only 1 or 2 commercial companies out there that could provide support. I'd like to think that RBWM has played its part in this kind of open source industry in the UK around kind of the GI theme. So there are now actually lots of companies now offering training, support and consultancy on GI products. Now, why do our staff like it? Basically because QGIS is easy to use. You know, I kind of regularly sit down with new people to the council and say, okay, I'm going to sit down with you. Have you used QGIS? Have you used GIS before? Yes, no. If the answer is yes, then I might sit with them for 15 minutes and show them the kind of where all the buttons are in QGIS and how to load layers, how to interrogate layers, how to print the map. If they're not new to GIS, then literally it might be sit down with them for sort of half hour, 45 minutes and say, you know, this is how you open a project, this is how you interrogate the map, this is how you digitize, this is how you produce a map, this is how you render up applications, etc. And in no time at all, people can use QGIS. It's absolutely fantastic on that front. It's fast and it is reliable. When we kind of an adult, when we introduced QGIS, we kind of implemented it from what we would term as low-level GIS users up to high-end super users. And the idea was there that as we went through deploying QGIS, when we got to a super user and a super user said, well, I don't like QGIS because it doesn't do X, Y, Z, we could actually have worked out what X, Y, Z was from actually implementing it to our lower level users. Now, we had one chap, I hope no one here is Scottish and will take offence to this. He was a stout Scottish chap, and you know, he loved his Esri, he loved his ArcMap, and he was going to be basically, if I can conquer his attitude towards QGIS, then I know I could take QGIS to the world, sort of thing. And what I managed to do was get him QGIS, and he basically says, you've deprived me now of my morning coffee. Because in his Esri days, what he used to do, he would come into the office, he would turn on his PC, and as soon as he got into his desktop window, he would launch ArcMap, and ArcMap would take nearly 10 to 15 minutes to load. Yeah, and he could go away, have his cup of tea, coffee, whatever, chit chat, come back to his desk, and he could crack on. With the way that QGIS is deployed, basically he launches the icon, a minute later he's in his project and he's actually doing work. So he kind of regularly complains that I've deprived him of his cup of coffee in the morning. And the staff like it because literally a new starter can start, and excuse me, we can have them using QGIS within 2 or 3 hours, and there's no license cost associated with that. And for departments where money's tight, they actually kind of really enjoy that. So why do I like it? Well, I like it because everyone can own it. I've worked with parish councils, I've worked with community groups, and I've worked with local archaeological societies. And basically, I've been able to give them QGIS, and I've been able to say, look, here's QGIS. This is what it can do. Here's a load of data. Here's how you digitize. Go create some maps. Go and have fun. With proprietary software, there was no way that people were going to be able to do that in those sort of arenas and communities. And I like it as well because I can have QGIS on my desktop at work, and I can have QGIS at home on my laptop. So in some ways, it's a double-edged sword. I can actually bring work home and use it locally, but equally, I can tinker around at QGIS at home in an evening and find something in there that was actually worthwhile using at home. When we had ARC, there was no way that that was going to happen because there was no way that work would pay for a separate license for my home use, or I was going to actually pay for an Esri or even a MapInfo license to do that myself. QGIS is brilliant at consuming data easily. Hopefully we'll have a kind of a bit of a demo of QGIS later, and have just a walkthrough to kind of give you a bit of a feel for those that haven't actually used it before. But it can consume a myriad of data, which is really nice. When we had our Esri technology prior to the QGIS implementation, if someone sent us a MapInfo tab file or a MIF file, we literally had to purchase an extension for like £2 to open that file, to look at it in our Esri stuff. Whereas in QGIS, someone sends me a tab file, someone sends me a shape file, someone tells me a file geodatabase, whatever. I can just chuck it straight into QGIS. It opens, I can look at the data, I can export it out to a database, I can do whatever I like. It's really nice. And then the development cycle of QGIS, although some might see it as perhaps a criticism of QGIS, I see it as a real plus. For instance, someone about 2 or 3 weeks ago released a plugin. I downloaded the plugin, had a play, found some faults with it, literally emailed the bloke back an hour later, and he says, oh, someone's already told me about that, and I've written a fix for it. Download the latest version of that plugin, and it'll be, those kind of things will be fixed. RBWM is actually a bronze sponsor of the QGIS project, so we actually kind of put in about €300 a year to kind of help maintain that kind of fast development pace. And I'm also kind of head up the QGIS user group in the UK, and we've contributed funds towards some of the newer functionality in version 2.12 and 2.14, I think it is. And it's that kind of that fast-paced development that is brilliant. I can stay on a version for a long time, or I can actually go to a new stable release of the version. I can go to bleeding edge nightly releases, and they're all kind of maintained and in effect not really de-supported, but the kind of the crowd moves along. We wouldn't see the pace of development in the proprietary world, and I think that's a real plus for QGIS. Kind of mentioned earlier that the kind of community is really helpful and really friendly, and I can't kind of elaborate any more than that. And for me, it does everything that I need. Now, obviously there are some people out there that like doing lots of 3D kind of stuff. I don't know if people have heard of BIM and all that sort of thing. QGIS isn't quite there, certainly on the 3D front yet. It's getting there by by all means, but it's not quite there yet. So therefore, you might need to think about if that's your arena, if that's your bag, perhaps looking at some of the proprietary solutions or there may well be GIS solutions open source solutions out there that kind of deal with the kind of that 3D thing a little bit better. So what other kind of open source tools do we use at Windsor and Maidenhead? Well, we've started to use a lot of something called Leaflet.js, which is a JavaScript library, and it helps to create really nice interactive maps. That kind of ties in really well with our PostGIS database. So we try to avoid, where possible, storing data in a file network drive. So our shape files, if we use any, will be our main kind of file type. But we will avoid using those and storing them on the network. We will instead put everything into this PostGIS elephant. PostGIS elephant being the elephant never kind of forgets sort of thing. So this kind of database security and retention. And PostGIS is a wonderful thing. So if you kind of start really using GIS and want to really kind of interrogate data, PostGIS database is a really good thing to use. And as I say, we're using them with Leaflet, with a bit of PHP, so we can kind of dive in using Leaflet straight into a PostGIS database and bring out data and display it on a map, or pretty much near real time. GDAL is a excuse me, is a open source library. It was originally developed really for raster kind of geographic information, but it's kind of snowballed to become a really resilient and the tool to do anything GIS related, and certainly a lot of QGIS is actually built on GDAL. So it allows you to kind of convert data from MIF files to shape files, upload CSV files into PostGIS, take data out of PostGIS into a tab file, do things with KMLs. You know, there's a plethora of things that it can do, and it's a really, really good resource. Not really GIS-y, but we also use a lot of Python. We use a lot of Python kind of in a loose sense to kind of do things with data. So, for example, the council has a contract with a gritting company, and we use Python in that instance to kind of say, I want to call the gritting lorry, I want to pull down that data, I want to kind of convert a bit of that data, and then I want to use Python to push it into my PostGIS database, and then I want QGIS and Leaflet to consume that data to disseminate that data more widely. This is just kind of one example of how we're using Python. And this other thing called a map server. Map server is pretty much a tool to kind of publish a GIS data. It can even be shapefile, tab file, or PostGIS data, even Oracle spatial data, into things called web mapping services, WMS or WFS, which is a web feature service, which is a way to kind of consume data into a kind of a broader picture. So, kind of to wrap up, really, where we at RBWM are kind of using QGIS and where we kind of see it going next. This kind of illustrates where, excuse me, where we're using QGIS at the moment, and we're going to probably start publishing that data that we use up into some sort of cloud database, probably a PostGIS database, where residents can interact with that data. People can consume that data into QGIS, for example, and manipulate that data in whatever way in the form of open data. But also kind of publish data back to back office applications. So it's kind of like a real 360 kind of feel of how data is kind of used and feel. But we're not there yet, but we're certainly on that way to that sort of model. And to kind of give you some ideas of some resources that might be useful to people, the QGIS UK email, web address, check that out, because we do have regional QGIS user group meetings. There's a southwest, a southeast, and the southeast is the one I look after. We have a Welsh QGIS user group and a Scottish QGIS user group. Nothing really in the Midlands has kind of set up or sprung up, but there's kind of always been itchings and inklings of something brewing there. And I'm in the process of trying to organise a QGIS user group in the southeast, sometime in the next 2 to 3 months. The QGIS.org website, really good resource if you're new to QGIS and want to kind of find out more about it, access documentation, different versions of QGIS as well. If you have any QGIS questions, the best place in the world to put them is on the GIS Stack Exchange. You can go on there and you can filter out on QGIS questions, set up mailing lists to kind of receive the latest QGIS questions as well. It's really, really good. You know, you can go on there and ask a question on a Sunday morning, and by Sunday lunchtime, you've probably got like 4 or 5 people all giving you similar advice to the same question. And it's a really, really good resource. And if you just want to find out a lot more about QGIS and who's using it, who's got blogs, posts, etc., the plugins qgis.org/planet website, really good resource. So that's me, Simon Miles, talking about QGIS and all its wonders. What I might do, if that's okay, I'm going to pick up a few questions first and then hopefully launch into kind of a bit of a demo for 5-10 minutes on QGIS. So we've got a couple of questions here regarding projections and is there any good tutorials online or anything? Well, projections, there are kind of 2 main projections, certainly we use and I use, which would be, in my instance, British National Grid, and the 1984 projection, so basically the world Mercator, so something Google would use. They're the main two we use, and I can show you how to kind of set that up in QGIS in a minute. We've got another question. One of the things that marked ArcView out was the layout capability. Is QGIS there yet? I think if you go to the QGIS website, I think they've got a Flickr feed, and the Flickr feed is basically people posting up maps that they've produced in QGIS. And I think if you go in there, you'll definitely see how good the quality of maps that you can actually produce in QGIS. Where QGIS can't produce the maps that you quite want, what I've done in the past is basically you can export the map out into something called an SVG file format, and I use an open source graphics package called Inkscape. Import it in there, and then basically Inkscape's very much like your CorelDRAW, your Photoshop, etc. And you can kind of make the map a lot more cleaner and smarter and more elegant than QGIS could possibly do for those needs. QGIS has a brilliant thing called Atlas, which allows you to quickly generate maps. It's a really good tool. I use it for our tree section when they need to produce maps for contracts. They might have, I don't know, 150 odd trees that they need to produce maps for a contractor, and within sort of like 10 minutes I can produce 150 odd maps using this thing called Atlas, just by using it to kind of configure, etc. I've got another question. I'm not familiar with map info. What are the main differences where QGIS scores or fails in comparison? To be honest, I once downloaded a copy of map info and got stuck within 10 minutes because I didn't even know how to open up a shapefile. So that's my limit of experience of map info, so I can't really help you on that one. Can you explain about the QGIS user group available around the country to our members? So the QGIS user group, as I said, are kind of a very informal group. We've got a Google Plus group you can join, and there's some discussions on there about, you know, this is what I'm playing with, this is how I do X, can anyone help me with this project, and it's a really good little resource, and it's mainly kind of pinned down to people who are in the UK, and it's not just local government, there's education, people in there, so from universities, for example, and there are people who are just interested in QGIS or from community groups. Is there another question? Is there yet a good portal hub for environmental GIS open data? I'm not entirely sure. There is obviously data.gov, which will have UK-based data in it. There might be some environmental stuff in there. There's a website called Magic that has a lot of kind of your conservation areas, green belt data, etc. That might be worth a shot. Another question. Oh yeah, someone's just suggested the Natural England website. That's it's another good resource there. Yeah. What are the best add-in plugins for landscape work? No idea. I have seen a cool plugin that enables you to create contour maps. So if you've got your Theodolite or EDM, you can take measurements from there and obviously plot out something in QGIS. But I don't really know much about that. Next question: is there 3D capabilities? So kind of hinted on this before. There is a plugin that does 3D more landscapey kind of fly-through type thing. I've not played on it for a good 6 months or so, but from what I remember is you kind of plug in all your layers, you load all your layers, and then you can use a plugin, QGIS plugin, that allows you kind of export that out into a URL web page, and then you can kind of pan around, move around landscapes, etc. That's quite a nice little one. Does it do, another question, sorry, does it do ZTVs, terrain modeling, contouring? Could it work with Google Earth to give 3D visualizations of data? I have no idea on that score, I'm afraid. You could obviously export the data out from QGIS and stick it into Google Earth using KMLs, but I don't know is the honest one on that score. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of have a bit of a play around with QGIS and kind of just show you just a bit about it, just kind of a drive through if no one's actually kind of familiar with it. So I'm just waiting for the screen to load up. Cool. So this is QGIS 2.12, and in this project here, I've got basically a load of open data that I sourced from Magic, and maybe Natural England as well, and the Ordnance Survey open data. Ordnance Survey data a website is brilliant for open data. So if you're needing a mapping for the UK, excuse me, a brilliant resource there. So in this application here, I kind of group my layers up. So I've got my historic environment layer. So I've got, in this instance, I'm looking around Petersfield along the A3, and I'm looking at scheduled ancient monuments, and I've got some data on listed buildings. So if we just have a kind of a zoom in there, you can see that we've got lots of kind of scheduled ancient monuments in that little bit of parkland, and we've got a fair few listed buildings as well. And our open data, VMD standing for Vector Map District. We can see we've got lots of different layers there. So we've got road, networks, etc. And the beauty of QGIS is that you can style up data really, really easily. So just to kind of give you an example of how you might style something up. So if I go and have a look at the attributes, so the detail behind this one. So here we can see that I've asked QGIS to use this style, and I've asked it to style up by something called grade. I'm using a column called grade. There are lots of different columns, so basically it's looking at the back end of the data, and it sees there's lots of columns, but I've asked it basically said order by grade, and it's found there's a value of grade 1, grade 2, or grade 2 star, and it always puts this kind of default value at the end. So as we saw in our map, we had quite a few of these grade 2 ones. So in this instance, what I can do is go into QGIS in that grade 2 one, and I can say, well, actually, look, I don't want to be a simple marker. I want it to be some sort of star type shape, and I can make its size a lot bigger. If I OK that, you can now see look, it's kind of changed into a star. If I OK that, my map will now have lots of little stars against it, where the actual grade 2 listed buildings are. And I can turn that layer off. I can just go and have a look at my scheduled entry monuments. I can use tools to find out what's going on at that location. So if I use my identify tool and I click on a map, I can go away and it says where I've just clicked, we've got a scheduled entry monument and we've got some ordnance survey features as well. So if I click on that scheduled entry monument, it will come back and it will tell me that it's a Borough, the scale it's captured, national grid references, etc. What's really good about QGIS is that this is beyond this kind of exercise, is that you can actually really tailor how this kind of form and attribute field really looks. So if you're populating data, for example, you can add in drop-down lists, date pickers, huge text pads, all sorts of different things. It's a really versatile tool in that sense. So earlier we said that QGIS could take in lots of different file formats. So it's just going to give you kind of some examples of those file formats. So here we can see that we've got some zip files it can take. It can take in an open source version of AutoCAD files, CSV files, shape files, things called GeoJSONs, XMLs. If you're using GPS tracks, it will take in GPS data, KML, tabs. There's kind of a plethora of data it can take in. We can also add in lots of rasters. We can connect to different types of database. So we can connect to a PostGIS database. And we can contact something that's called a spatial light database. Spatial light database is literally a database that you can move around on a thumbstick. It's very small. If you're MySQL, you can use that, or you can connect into Oracle. Before I was talking about map server. You can use map server to produce these things called WMS feeds, and in this instance I can connect into something called an open feed from Aston Technology, and I can actually bring in some aerial photography, or I can bring in some really old historical maps, and these all live off on a server in Cloud Cuckoo Land somewhere. We talked briefly about plugins. So if I go into the plugin manager, you will see that you can see every single plugin that's ever been created, and there are heaps. Someone asked if there was any kind of plugins to do with landscape. I'm just going to do a quick landscape query, and there seems to be some sort of landscape type plugins developed. Quite nice. You can see what you've got installed. So these are all the plugins that I've got installed. You can see there that I've got, even though I've opted to move away from Esri, I've still got an Esri REST API connector. So basically that will hook into anyone's ArcGIS server, so I can consume their data if I wanted to. I've got plugins that can be upgraded, and yeah, I don't have a little checkbox in the back ticked, but there would be one in there that says new, and I can look at plugins that are now new to QGIS. QGIS can do all sorts of stuff on the analysis side, so there's a load of different tools and plugins for that sort of thing. So it's really nice to use. And again, just for vector, there's also stuff for raster as well. We use a lot of the georeferencer on Windsor and Maidenhead. So we will take a developer plan, we will take a scanned image, we might even take some hard copy aerial photography. We'll scan that and actually reference it and actually give it coordinates so we can actually stick it into the QGIS map and use it that way for interrogation. Someone's asked, can you import data from QGIS into CAD? We use a tool to be able to export data out. There are caveats to it, and I think there's some good blogs and threads out there. But basically, if you've got a layer, you can ask that layer to save as, and what you will then be able to do is, just as well as open data, you can export data in a myriad of different types. So there will be one in there that says an AutoCAD DXF, and so you can export that out, and then you can bring that into AutoCAD. It's quite nice. If you're using AutoCAD and you're using AutoCAD Map and you're using a PostGIS database, you can actually consume data held in a PostGIS database. So someone can use data stored in QGIS, displayed in QGIS, edit in QGIS, writes back to the PostGIS database, and someone in AutoCAD, for example, can view that data effectively live and on the go. So that kind of wraps it up really as kind of just a quick show and tell on QGIS. If you do have any more kind of specific questions, then please do get in contact. My details should hopefully be pinging up in a second. Yeah, there they are. Yeah, please do drop me a line if you've got any questions anytime. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Simon. That was really interesting, and I hope everyone found the same. I certainly learned loads. As always, guys, if you do think of any questions after the webinar's finished, do just ping them across to me, and as always, 24 hours after, you'll be getting an automated email for any feedback. We really want to hear from you. We're constantly striving to make these better, deliver them better, and make sure we're hitting the right kind of targets. And this webinar will be available on YouTube. You can go search it straight from YouTube, or there'll be a link from our website. So once again, thank you very much, Simon, and see you next week. Bye.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Bye-bye.